Geographically, Barrie is not the typical checkerboard city whose policy and regulation are rigidly set. A generation ago, Barrie could more easily be defined as a small-scale industrial city with ample room to grow. Family, work, and community for the majority of residents were, at one time, all within close proximity, making the city's needs and requirements pretty straightforward from a planning perspective. Today, a commuter city and a retirement destination are still some of the lingering descriptives on the tongues of those who remember yesteryear. However, survey says the region is a thriving entrepreneurial center, science and tech hub, and is becoming home to a growing number of manufacturing technology-related industries. This, as witnessed by record numbers of industrial development applications submitted in 2017. A growing population center with a limited supply of serviceable lands on which to accommodate our future needs sets the demands for thought on how to best utilize land by challenging conventional thought and helping to shape our vision for the future. As we grow and evolve, so too does the policy and regulation that reconciles and fortifies that growth and evolution. The tasks and challenges that take a residential, commercial, and industrial development from concept to completion are as varied and numerous as the types and sheer volume of proposals that come before our City Council. Beyond the Mayor and each of Barrie's 10 City Councillors, one of the more bodacious and often heard voices on a Monday evening at Barrie City Hall for over a decade is that of Land Use Planner Darren Vella of Innovative Planning Solutions, as he extols the virtues and merits of many of the residential, commercial, and industrial progressions that have and will continue to shape and define the landscape throughout the region. Darren Vella understands both sides of the municipal development process, having worked for the Township of Springwater as a planning director and in his current capacity as the founder and president of Innovative Planning Solutions.
Thanks for joining us, Darren. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
As our audience knows, hopefully has come to expect, we love to talk about on this show the things that are on the minds of people at home. Typically it's around real estate, it's around finance, but obviously it's around the things that people are really discussing. What's the shape of our city? What's the future of our city hold? What does life really hold for us? So we're glad to have you on. Thank you for joining us. I got a question that I've got to ask you. You know, a lot of kids dream about making a difference, changing the world, actually impacting and shaping the future. You actually get to do that on a daily basis. How does it feel?
It's actually a really fascinating career to be in the urban planning business. It's when you're looking at a career growing up, I never did think that I would have such an impact on shaping a city. So planning is a fascinating career for anyone to choose.
Yeah, it's not necessarily that easy though, because you're dealing with some conflicting views. There are people who love things just the way they were. Leave it alone. It's perfect. It's fine the way it is. Versus obviously, you know, those who want to see change and progress, and we all have our own definition of what progress looks like. So that's really, you know, a big part of your career, I take it.
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many facets involved in starting a project and actually completing the project. It's a very integrated, very complex process from start to finish.
When you take a plan from start to finish, be it a residential plan or commercial industrial, over the course of that planning process, give us some insight as to where your directive is coming from. Is it primarily developer? Does the city play a role in that? Just tell us how that may unfold and how you're involved in that aspect of it.
Sure. So there are a lot of expectations when making any type of development. So you have your client expectations, you've got the municipal staff expectations, and then you also have the public's expectations. So typically all three of those are competing with one another. Our role as land use planners is really to find a way to meet every part's expectations. Yeah. And it sometimes results in a project where everyone leaves equally unhappy, but that usually means
success.
That usually means you've actually accomplished a good development.
Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, though, I think it's important to frame some things around it. You're not an architect.
Correct.
You're not the person who decides whether that's going to be brick or siding. You're not the one who chooses what the window dressings are going to look like. You're a land use planner, and you've said that a few times. Maybe help me out, help us out with just some, you obviously work with architects, I'm presuming,
yes.
a little bit?
Yeah.
So take us through that a bit.
Sure. So, I mean, more and more there is the need for urban design to be included in the development process. And what's happening is the architectural component and the planning component are becoming a lot more integrated. But typically as a planner, you're dealing with the overall site design, so the location of buildings, the size of the buildings, what the buildings are going to be used for. Is it a mixed-use building with residential and commercial? Is it solely a residential building? Are the buildings apartment versus condominium? They all have different processes that they need to go through. And the architects then take the overall size and uses of the building and come up with an elevation and exterior and interior design.
Perfect. We don't have a lot of time before we go to our first break. Joe, do you mind to bring up that just overall shot of the city, the existing built boundary of the city of Barrie? And maybe, Darren, you can talk about, just for a quick second, no, the overall, yeah, that one there. So if you can just tell us, this is the built boundary, and it's different for shaping or redesigning an existing cityscape, what we call gentrification or intensification and stuff, versus going from a blank canvas. So maybe you can take us through sort of what you see in the city of yesterday.
So the city of yesterday is quickly evolving into the city of the future for Barrie. And so when we're dealing with infill, gentrification, intensification projects, there's a lot more facets involved in how to design the sites. They're typically a lot more controversial as compared to developing over top of farmland or vacant 100-acre parcels of land.
I don't imagine a lot more deliberate and purposeful planning is going into than, say, 25, 30 years ago, when we had what seemed to be at the time endless amounts of vacant land on which to work. Now we have a limited supply, so the need to get it right seems even more crucial today than at any time for you and for the city.
So when we come back from the break, let's explore getting it right. Let's explore a little bit more the difference between your job, because you do both, intensification inside the built boundary, as well as you're a huge significant player in developing what our future is going to look like as we grow a little bit to the south. So when we come back, we'll look at some more examples of that, and you can take us through what you've been thinking with your clients.
Sounds good.
Excellent. And we're back with Darren Vella of Innovative Planning Solutions, and we're talking about not just Barrie, but because your job takes you well beyond Barrie's boundaries for development and the work you do. But what I want to talk a little bit about is there are changes and evolutions in design and development. There's a lot of different influencing factors. Built product has changed. Yeah, stick build is allowing us to go much higher, leaving us with different types of buildings that can be built for residential and that. Can you tell us where the influences are coming from, just quick off the top? Where do you see the major changes? Are they demand that's price-based or population-based, lifestyle change-based, or how does it all come together?
Sure. So there's been a lot of changes, you're right, Mike, in terms of how things were built 10 years ago versus how they're built today. So, and there's a lot of examples with actually projects under construction right now in the city of Barrie. So there are a number of 6-story buildings, walk-up apartment buildings, condominium buildings that are being built. So those previously were only permitted up to 4 stories in height out of wood construction. And what the wood construction has allowed is the opportunity for taller buildings to be built in Barrie, because historically building things out of concrete was too expensive based on the price point that you could sell units for.
So it discouraged development proposals coming forward, the cost alone.
The cost factor would make them prohibitive for sure.
And another thing with regard to cost too is, given that prices have jumped, literally doubled in the Barrie area average prices in the last 3 to 5 years. That has encouraged more developers to come forward, I would think. And that in itself causes a shift in, you take, the family or the couple that lives in a house they've been in for 25 years in the East End, they're not going to go into one of those new condo developments. Young couple's going to move into their East End home, and in order to carry it, they may have to put a basement apartment. So, one unit that you're involved with there is effectively creating the opportunity for 2 to 3 different living accommodations. So we are seeing a whole shift because values are going high. Sorry to take us in a whole different direction there, but it all comes back to new development, and so long as the incentive's there, financial incentive, as it increases, you get busier, I would think.
We're getting calls constantly from developers interested in coming to Barrie from outside of Barrie.
Yes.
On a regular basis.
So with that in mind, though, I think Mike describes a pretty natural evolution of things, right? People moving as their needs change, as their family moves along through different phases of life. But when you're actually going into an already existing community and you're going to change the face of it, you're going to change the shape of that community, you can't help but upset the apple cart for some. And it's quite reasonable that people are going to be suspicious or maybe a little bit interested, resistant, concerned. You could pick any number of adjectives to try to be nice about it, because you got to be fair to the way that how they've always known it's being changed. So how do you deal with that, that potential resistance? And I guess more importantly, the question can be, can better design alleviate that frustration or that fear?
And that's a very good question. So, and Barrie's experienced a lot of growing pains since the implementation of intensification corridors and intensification nodes. So as you drive through Barrie now, you'll notice that along Essa Road and Yonge Street, there's these developments coming up, which there may have been 1 or 2 homes on these properties, and now there's 50 or 60 townhouses being constructed.
Let's bring up that other shot there, Joe. That shot of that one there. So this is something that we're seeing quite, I don't want to say frequently, but it's not an uncommon sight to be seen. You talked about Essa Road. Essa Road was a country road. It was County Road 27 basically,
yes.
Right? And now it's gone from single detached, larger lots, maybe a small business like an engine shop happening in the backyard in a shed or a shop. And now you're seeing this. Obviously comes with it some traffic concerns, or design has to be part of that. So tell us, we're seeing building right up to the street. Tell us what's in the eyes of a planner.
So this is exactly the vision that the city has for Essa Road, and ultimately what we're trying to do is just to make better use of the infrastructure that's available. So we're trying to put more people in a smaller space, but at the same time, the people that are coming, we're hoping, are not going to be driving their cars every day. They're going to be taking transit. The neighborhood or the new community that they're living in is going to offer them opportunities for park area. They're basically communities within communities that we're building.
So maybe, Joe, we can flip to that overall concept drawing that actually shows the what we referred to, I guess, as we've been hearing as the complete community. The one with the field, if you don't mind, Joe, the field.
As we go to that, I just want to add the city, and I guess to a point you have to be mindful of this too. It's not just about accommodating a greater and growing population. It's also accommodating various income levels of people too. I mean, it's great that you can take a corner that 3 or 4 houses and put something in there that may accommodate 50 to 75 people or whatever. But there has to be, if you're displacing a certain number of people in that gentrification that's taking place, we must be mindful. And I'm certain that the city of Barrie is mindful of looking out for those people that are being displaced within. And you're seeing that at the planning stage for some of these? Are you purposefully planning to have affordable housing within certain projects, or is that something that comes after? Or?
Well, it's something that the city's actually pushing on every single project, is some element of affordable housing. So with these intensification projects, the price point naturally is lower because in intensification areas, we're not building detached homes.
Yes.
So there is typically a lower price
Cost per square foot. Yeah,
cost per
lower.
square foot. The overall value of a townhouse is always going to be lower than a single detached dwelling. So we know in the south end of Barrie, there is going to be a vast amount of new single detached dwellings being offered. So really these infill projects are more geared towards townhouse, mixed use buildings, and condominium or apartment buildings.
But there's a double-edged, or I don't want to call it a double-edged sword. There's two purposes for that. You've got the rail line, you've got the mass transit in the core, and that may be servicing the commuter population, that may be servicing the young professionals. Is that what you're saying? It's logically, it makes sense to put that style of built form or building type by the public transit?
Absolutely. So there are some key locations in Barrie which, with the direction that the city is headed, are going to see gentrification happen.
So does the dream still exist, though? Because I think a lot of people who are either Canadians or who identify themselves as Canadians, part of that identity has always included the dream of owning a home with a backyard or a front yard or something like that. Is that still reasonable and realistic? You talked about infrastructure. Mm-hmm. I know politically we can say, and it's quite true, it doesn't matter what anybody's thoughts are, it's virtually unsustainable to keep building in a way where you could have 10 people paying for the services and the cost to run at one, a certain parcel of land versus one, right?
Correct.
So is the dream still possible, though?
I mean, I would think that in the city of Barrie, the dream is a lot more possible than somewhere in the GTA, where it's going to be a lot more difficult for that dream to be realized. But obviously, in terms of building a city out, it's very important to offer a variety of housing for all spectrums of society.
And what that the model, that dream is shifting from one generation to the next. So the multi-unit is becoming part of that dream as opposed to the detached.
So when we come back from the break, we will talk about the future. We'll talk about the South and the annexation lands as they were once known, and we'll talk about what things look like for the future.
Right.
And we're here with Darren Vella, who's a land use planner and president of Innovative Planning Solutions. Thanks for being with us today. We've had a great talk. The takeaway so far, though, is that the Canadian dream is still alive, especially in Barrie. There's hope for people who still want detached homes, and there's also good, healthy, well thought out evolution inside the built boundary as we embrace slightly growing population, and we embrace efficiency of space and integrate good design and planning into it. Am I getting it right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, good. So we've got theoretically upwards of the size of the city of Orillia mandated to be moving into the south portion of Barrie, the new South Lands.
Yes.
And give us a picture.
So that picture has taken a long time to be realized. I think the public will now start to see construction vehicles showing up probably towards the end of this year, but from our perspective, from the planner's perspective, this process started back in 2009. So when you're dealing with such large tracts of land, it takes a long time to plan it out, to get it right.
Yes.
And
it's not a one-shot deal. You go back
No.
to the drawing board many times over, I guess, and evolve a
there's so many different agencies and different disciplines, consultants required to complete a project of that size. I think everyone in the industry is very happy in how close we are to actually construction taking place.
So you talked about a couple of things, and Joe, you have that photo of the playing field with the homes built around it. Darren, you mentioned earlier that good design and land use planning includes proximity to transit, includes hoping that people aren't getting in their car to drive to the grocery store everywhere, but within the community there's a real sense of community. So that can include a walkable neighborhood, bike paths, green space. It's not going to be a concrete jungle. So describe what that looks like. And also, who's moving into this? Is it people that are part of migration, that they're going to be new to the Barrie area, or is it people actually within Barrie who are going to look at this as an opportunity?
Yeah, and it's very important to understand the city's done a lot of growth management studies to determine actually who's coming to Barrie, just to figure out, how are we designing our areas. So typically from a planning standpoint, we like to have all of the services, the day-to-day services that people needs within a 10-minute walk of your home. So corner stores, parks, schools, all need to be within walking distance of every resident in the new communities. And that's why what you'll see in New Barrie is a change to the overall design on how these streets are aligned and how the area is actually going to be used.
Is there an increasing demand, obviously, for green, environmentally friendly technologies and built products, and just means in which we heat our homes. Are you involved with more and more of that with a lot of the residential projects? Or?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things the builders like to market is how efficient their homes are.
Yes.
So there's a requirement from the Ontario government in terms of a minimum efficiency of your home, and those typically like to be exceeded in terms of what the product is that's being delivered.
So let me ask you and I didn't feed you this before, but you're in the business. You've put your entire working career into land use planning. You obviously have to believe in the work that you're doing. I presume, I know your Rolodex is full. I know your schedule is full. Are there some projects that you just decide they're not for you? They don't fit with your sort of your mandate or your mission in life? Do you have something that sort of calls to you? This is the type of work I want to do, versus not?
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of people that come to my office or call our office saying they have an idea, they have a plan for the property, and as a planner we may just not agree with that particular project, and we would indicate to that person that, you know, we're not going to be able to support that project. So from a planning standpoint, you actually have to believe that what you're developing is the right thing for that particular property. You don't just take on a project for the sake of, you know, sending out a bill or creating an invoice.
Yeah, I'd like to close out with a focus for the future here, and just I'll just throw out some names of streets there that I'm curious where they're headed, and maybe with your crystal ball, however broad or limited that might be, but tell us what you see. Like, okay, for example, Bayfield Street, the Bayfield Mall, that stretch of commerce. Do you see much change there in the next 10, 15 years?
Bayfield Street will see a significant amount of change, and that's primarily due to the fact that shopping trends are changing dramatically. So a lot of, you know, it's one of the only streets that I can think of where you have 3 malls that are within a couple kilometers of each other. So there
Which
would
was a
be
mistake from the beginning, I would think, because none of them have ever, not all 3 have simultaneously prospered, have they?
Yeah. So I think, you know, there's opportunities there. Those are such large tracts of land for redevelopment of more residential, more mixed use, purpose-built housing
Love to see it.
that are in proximity to a lot of available services.
To a smaller degree, the stretch of Essa Road from, say, Tiffin Street, that intersection by the up to the 400. There's opportunity there for repurposing, I would think.
Well, that's definitely a
that?
section that people have been talking about forever.
Yeah.
This is our gateway presence. So how do we improve the gateway is what people are wondering.
And I think a lot of residents probably been frustrated over the last couple of months as the city's been rebuilding that road, but they've been rebuilding it to make sure the infrastructure that's there can accommodate redevelopment and intensification. So the opportunity
That's a
there
sign of things to come.
is also very great.
In my lifetime?
For change. Absolutely.
In your lifetime. The man who used the word Rolodex in the last sentence.
Thank God for what did you call it the other day? Grecian formula or something like that. So in our lifetime we're going to see change. In our lifetime, change doesn't have to be scary. Change can be positive. It can be green. It can be based in community. We can really take, but the bottom line is though that large organizations and the city itself takes some time. Right, it takes some time to evolve. Your relationship as a planner, not your relationship, but the relationship between the planners and the administration of the city, does it have to be combative or can it be positive? What do you see in your industry?
I've always been one to preach on 2 minds are better than one. So finding a way to work with the municipal planners, finding a way to work with the public usually results in a better development at the end of the day.
Yeah. On that note, how would you rate Barrie as a municipality in terms of ease of cooperation, the ability to put those 2 minds together?
Oh, there's a tough
and
one.
get it in,
I can step out from the table.
No
if you
pressure.
want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This question was for Darren. So.
That's a difficult question, and it's difficult to answer only because there's been a lot of changes, I think positive changes with Barrie staff in terms of getting the right people in place to deal with the type of development pressures that are coming. So
it's moving in the right direction.
It's definitely moving in the right direction.
Now, as an investor, and I don't know the answer to the question, but I'm going to assume you pour your heart and soul into this as a profession. You love what you do. You've already stated that. You live in the area, you live in the region, you work in the area for sure, and work in the region. An investor, what is the attitude of an investor? There's homeowners, but there's also those who are looking at this as real estate is, regardless of what anybody thinks of, it's an amazing investment opportunity. How do you view that, and how do you view the future for Barrie as an investment opportunity?
Well, I think the investment opportunities in Barrie are bright. I mean, you can already see that there's very little land available for people to purchase. So the development industry has been keeping an eye on Barrie for quite some time. Yeah. So it's something that I believe is going to continue.
Yeah. And you look at, for example, new development projects, their opening days, the lineups around the blocks. People partially looking for owner-occupied, but a lot of those are investors and know that Barrie is the place to come to do that.
You've got 20 seconds to wrap us up, my friend.
Okay, well, thank you, Darren. It's been enlightening, and I hope you'll leave that door open for a future opportunity to come back, and because there's always a lot more to talk about. We are a growing, evolving city, and you're right there at the forefront of that happening, and I've enjoyed everything you shared with us today.
And
Thanks.
if you've got questions for us, you can
If
email us
you've got questions, email. We're going to put it at the bottom of the screen because we both forgot.
Email at hittinghome.ca. Email at hittinghome.ca.
Yes.
Darren
There
Vella,
you go.
President of Innovative Planning Solutions, Land Use Planner. Thank you for your time. Thanks for joining
You're
us
welcome.
today. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.